French name.
Yes, I'm not familiar with French, but
it's okay. I cannot pronounce German names. Or...
Okay, you have the stage.
Okay, thank you. Just want to tell Tamer that the program I'm working on will be open source. So feel free to contact me if we manage to make it work, the augmented reality and everything. We can share the result with you. Hi, everyone. So thank you for having me today. Can I share my screen? Yeah. Just give me a second. So my name is Gabrielle Trépanier Jobin. I'm a university professor in game studies in Montreal, Canada. A French speaker, as you can see, because yes, some people speak French in Canada. Actually, everybody who lives in the province of Quebec. Today I'm going to talk about the survival of HUIZINGA'S magic circle. And as a professor in game studies, I spent at least one course every year discussing the magic circle key concept with master students. But when I heard about this conference 3 weeks ago, I was, however, not currently working on this topic and researching about HUIZINGA'S magic circle. I was actually quite busy with other research, but when I saw the call for proposal for this conference, I was really inspired. And I felt compelled to submit a proposal. So all this to say that what I will present today is just the beginning of an idea, and I hope to expand this idea in the upcoming months. So I'm really open to suggestions. I'm sad that you didn't have a pause before my talk because it's quite maybe a bit heavy and theoretical, but yeah, I hope it's not going to be too hard for you. All right, so the concept of magic circle is generally attributed to the Dutch historian Johan Huizinga. In his seminal book Homo Ludens, the magic circle features in his list of playgrounds alongside the arena, the card table, the temple, the stage, the screen, the tennis court, the court of justice, which are all in form and function playgrounds within which special rules obtain. All are temporary world within the ordinary world dedicated to the performance of an act apart. However, in fact, it's more Salen and Zimmerman who in their book Rules of Play, which actually became kind of a game studies Bible, who singled out the expression magic circle and used it as a shortcut for the idea of a special place in time and space created by a game. And it's also them who imply that HUIZINGA'S circle is an enclosed space that is separate from the ordinary world. Zimmerman himself admitted in his article, Jerked Around the Magic Circle, Clearing the Air 10 years later, that the magic circle is not something that comes only from HUIZINGA, and that Katie Salen and him more or less invented the concept, clarifying key elements that were important for their book and reframing it in terms of semiotic and design. That said, many scholars have in the past decades criticized the spatiotemporal division between games and daily life suggested by the magic circle metaphor. Copier, for instance, argued that the magic circle is a problematic utopia, which depicts the play space as a magical wonderland, while in fact this space is negotiated between players and producers and among players. Similarly, Taylor said that the magic circle rhetoric, according to which games are closed systems that allow players to operate outside everyday life, is misleading, since players constantly push against these boundaries. She said that the segregation of game and non-game is based on a misunderstanding of our relationship with technology and culture. Even though Consalvo admitted that the boundary marking game space from normal space can be useful, she asserted that it has always been breached since everyday rules apply in game environments and compete with rules that are specific to a game, a player community, or a gaming context. For instance, real money is often involved during gameplay. Cheaters judge their gaming practices according to moral values, etc. LEHDONVIRTA claimed that the inaccurate dichotomy between the real world and the virtual world is rooted in the magic circle concept, which ignores that social norms and laws influence how people interpret games rules, that relationships between players can be as genuine as face-to-face relationships, that players' geographic location impact their possible alliances with other players in online games, sorry, and that avatars and players' identities are intertwined, etc. So for all these reasons and many others, several game scholars suggested replacing the expression magic circle with more accurate metaphors. LEHDONVIRTA, for instance, proposes to replace it by Strauss' concept of social world, which refers to a universe of discourse and a sphere of effective communication instead of territorial or formal borders. CONSALVO, for a part, suggests to replace the term magic circle by Turner's concept of liminal space, referring to a change of attitude that one adopts while remaining in the same geographical space, just like it's the case in the context of the carnival, for instance. She also recommends to use Goffman's concept of mode, which refers to the convention by which a given activity already defined by a primary framework is transformed into another activity that takes the first one as a model, but that the participant consider as significantly different. JUUL'S suggests to use the puzzle metaphor, which, according to him, better reflects that the boundaries between games and daily life are constantly negotiated by players, and that a game must be part of a context to be experienced as something separate from that context. Arsenault and Perron suggest to use the expression magic cycle to describe the relationship between a game and a player, since it better illustrates that playing a game is a continuous loop between the player's input and the game's output, and that the temporal dimension of gameplay prevails on its spatial dimension. Here on the picture, the expanding spiral illustrates the fact that new features and challenges are introduced progressively in the game, and that players gradually refine their skills. Well, despite all these criticism and suggestions, the concept of magic circle has survived while none of these other metaphors or alternative concepts impose themselves. Maybe game scholars realized that the closed circle they were complaining about was in fact a product of their own creation. As Arsenault and Perron argue, HUIZINGA'S magic circle cannot be reduced to spatial consideration. It also illustrates the fact that we see and behave in game differently than in our ordinary life psychological frame. This is what HUIZINGA meant at the end of his definition of play on page 58 of the French edition, when he mentions that play comes with the consciousness that it is different from ordinary life. While reflecting on the concept of the magic circle 10 years after the publication of Rules of Play, Zimmerman also specifies that HUIZINGA never takes the full-blown magic circle point of view that games are ultimately separate from everything else in life and that rules are the sole fundamental unit of games. In fact, HUIZINGA's thesis is much more ambivalent on these issues, and he actually closes his seminal book with a passionate argument against a strict separation between life and games. So were Salen and Zimmerman. In Rules of Play, they asked the question, to what extent boundaries between the real world and artificial world of the game delimited by the magic circle is permeable. They stated that it can be considered open or closed, depending on what aspect of the game is studied. Drawing on Suit's definition of play, Salen and Zimmerman also considered the magic circle from the player's point of view. They said that entering into the play of a game involves illusory attitude, allowing players to adopt rules which require one to employ worse rather than better means for reaching an end. In HUIZINGA'S sentence, from which Salen and Zimmerman borrowed the expression magic circle, the words actually refer to a ritual magic circle, since HUIZINGA was in fact trying to highlight the similarities between sacred rituals and play. He was trying to demonstrate that playgrounds such as the track, the tennis court, the upscotch, the chessboard do not differ formally from the temple or the magic circle. So in the field of ritual magic, a magic circle is a sacred space marked out physically with salt, flour, chalk, or only visualized by a ritual magician. They are believed to contain energy or to provide a protective barrier between the practitioner of ritual magic and what they summon. The barrier is believed to be fragile, so that leaving or passing through the circle would weaken, dispel, or break it. This definition of a ritual magic circle reminds of APTER'S idea that in the play state, you experience a protective frame which stands between you and the real world and its problem, creating an enchanted zone in which, in the end, you are confident that no harm can come. Although this frame is psychological, interestingly, it often it has a perceptible physical representation. So considering all this, I tried to understand why the expression that was mainly used by Huizinga to refer to a ritual magic circle left such a mark on game scholars' minds. And I realized that the critics of this concept tend to insist a lot on the term circle and not much on the term magic, which also seems very important in the expression. Salen and Zimmerman quickly mentions in Rules of Play that the term magic circle is appropriate because there is in fact something genuinely magical that happens when a game begins. Within the magic circle, special meanings accrue and cluster around objects and behavior. In effect, a new reality is created defined by the rules of the game. Pieces on the board become kings, queens, and obey to special rules. However, Salen and Zimmerman did not deepen the link between play and magic. To understand what is so magical about play, I therefore turned to the French philosopher Henriot, who is unfortunately not translated in English yet. He perceives play as a subjective experience that involves a ludic attitude characterized by 3 moments. Magic or irrealism is the first moment, which implies a magical transmutation of the objects and situation that take on a new meaning. During this moment, the player loses contact of reality to enter in the fictional world. Ludicity or realism is the second moment, when the player takes a step back and becomes aware that it is a game and not an hallucination. And the third moment is kind of the end result between the first and the second moment. It's a moment of illusion or surrealism. The player allows herself to be enchanted without losing contact with reality. She does not really believe in the fiction, but pretend to believe. These sentences from Henriot explains well the tension between the first and the second moment that results in the moment of illusion. A game in which one does not enter, in which one does not let oneself caught up, is not a game. The game forms an enchanting circle around the player. You have to be inside to play. If you stay outside, you're not playing. You may not understand what the game is about, or even if it is a game. But if you enter the game to the point where you forget that you are playing, then you are alienated. You are no longer playing. Whoever does not enter does not play. Whoever allows himself to be caught up does not play anymore. So when I came back to the book Homo Ludens, I realized that Huizinga also spoke about a ludic attitude and conveyed similar ideas that are not discussed in debates around the magic circle. He said one essential characteristic of play is the consciousness, even if relegated to the background, of acting only in appearance. The state of mind of a ritual's participant, which for him is very similar to the state of mind of a player, is not one of ecstasy and total illusion, but an awareness of the not true in the background. And he also specified that illusion actually comes from illugio, which literally means entering in the game. When he talks about religious sacred ritual, especially those involving mask and role play, he specifies that the participant excitation is partly spontaneous and genuine and partly ordered by a traditional duty. In other words, partly feinted to avoid ruining the ritual. He says the enchanter or the enchanted is both conscious and duped, but he wants to be duped. He is playing up to the role and partially conscious of the fiction's inauthenticity. What is interesting in Henriot's theory compared to Huizinga's theory is that Henriot is opposed to the idea of play as something sacred. He believed that play has to lose its sacred character to be possible because players cannot completely believe in the fiction in order to be playing. According to him, play is opposed to the sacred because players have to keep a distance from their activity, unlike it is the case in religious ritual. Henriot's conception of the ludic attitude seems to me similar to the attitude one adopts in front of a magician, also called an illusionist. Just like the player, the magician spectator is uncertain of the situation and capable to know what will make sense the next moment. The magician spectator is eager to discover the secret, willing to temporarily accept the illusion, seduced by the possibility of a world with amazing potentialities. The player, just like the magician spectator, voluntarily let herself be fooled to maximize her fun. So to conclude, the conception of the player's attitude as similar to the attitude one adopts in front of a magician might help us to understand why the magic circle metaphor sticks around. Focusing on the word magic more than on the word circle allows to account for the richness of the magic circle concept and to give it the credit it deserves. Establishing parallels between play and the art of the illusionist might help us to close the debate around the magic circle once and for all. Thank you.